Yeah, so at the dawn of modern computing in the United States, thousands of technology workers recognized the awesome power of the tools that they were building and bristled at their use for war. Companies like Honeywell, for instance, were most well known for making products like the Pentax camera. It was the computer camera. But they were also one of the largest military contractors in the US economy. They produced fragmentation bombs that were used in the Vietnam War. And this history might not be as remote as it seems. Last summer, workers at companies including Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others protested their company's sale of technology to government agencies like the Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement Agency and the Department of Defense. In other words, we still have to ask questions like, what the heck do we do when the technology that we build is being used to harm others? Who makes these decisions anyway? And what does a just technological future look like? My name is Aaron. I'm a software engineer at The New Yorker. I'm also a member of the New Yorker Union. And I want to talk about organizing. Organizing is bringing people together to work collectively for a common cause or purpose. I want to talk about how people in our industry, in our profession, have organized in the past. I think as developers and engineers, we tend to necessarily focus on the future, like what's new and exciting. And I think kind of like taking a hint maybe from Kelly's oral history, I think it's important for us to take a look at where we've been before, what's been done in the past. And I'm hoping that through this talk, we can, looking at that history will help inform us for what we can do to make sure that the technology that we build and use is applied in a just and humane way. I also think that this history is important because it tells us something about our own profession. This is a story about the birth of computing in the United States, but contrary to the origin mythology of Silicon Valley, the subjects here are not temporarily embarrassed founders or entrepreneurs, and the story isn't set in the garages of passionate hobbyists in Palo Alto. This is a story about regular people, like regular people for us, at least. Computer operators and key punch operators, COBOL programmers, Fortran programmers, regular people for like the 60s, right? And they're talking seriously about the future of technology and society, and they're considering the impact that their work is having on the world and the legacy that they're leaving. They believed in the potential for technology to radically improve society, but they bore little resemblance to the billionaire technological utopians of today. They understood that there's no technological patch for a broken system. If we wanted to change the world, people needed to organize. And I think to begin looking at this history, we have to take a look at the foundations of technological work in the United States. And that means, I think, going to the post-war era at the end of the Second World War. This is an era that ushered in an unprecedented period of mass consumption and technological convenience into people's everyday lives. It reshaped the way that people thought about their lives in the future. But it was also, this consumer's paradise was also built on top of a war economy. And with the Cold War as a backdrop, government, military, and corporate bureaucracies became tightly integrated into what became known as the military-industrial complex. Military might and space-age convenience became entwined in popular culture and advertising. So this Chrysler ad, for instance, boasts of Chrysler's role in missile production, presumably because they believed that made them better at making cars. I don't know. Star Trek is another example, if not a provocative one. I think its optimism for humanity belies its own militarism. Humanity may someday be able to traverse the galaxy and even eliminate racial prejudice, but not without military hierarchy and the ability to blow shit up. A virtual army of technological labor was called upon to construct this era of prosperity and peace through superior firepower. And in this period, engineers enjoyed newfound prestige as the expert designers of convenience at home and military dominance abroad. But this world of universal affluence and security was an illusion, and the birth of the civil rights and anti-war movements forced public attention to account for ongoing segregation, injustice, and war. Whoops. Technological abundance began to draw popular skeptics like Martin Luther King, for example, who proclaimed that society's scientific power had outrun its spiritual power. We had guided missiles and misguided men. And the French theorist Herbert Marcuse also gained popularity for his book, The One-Dimensional Man, where he argued, among other things, that advanced technological societies inevitably tended towards totalitarianism and repression. As unrest grew over inequality and war, engineers felt tested and their professional and political identities started to shift. So Jim Morey, for example, designed computer systems for defense contractors. This is not Jim, by the way. This is just like some stock photography I found on Google. But imagine that this guy's name is Jim. He didn't give any ethical considerations at all to his work, at least not at first. You know, that stuff was for radicals. He was a conservative guy, and he found his work interesting. He just wanted to, you know, do some cool stuff. But when Jim's wife became ill, he needed to occupy himself, and so he started to spend time reading. He came across the underground press that was circulating amongst engineers, and that's when he began to change his mind. He started to notice the incredible seriousness of the men that he worked with and the way that they talked about the Cold War, and he felt himself begin to peel away. Some government men approached him and they said, "We'd like you to now apply the techniques you've been developing. Specifically, we'd like you to use them to plan operational bombing. We'd like you to assume Southeast Asia as the area and Vietnam as the target." When Jim resigned, none of his coworkers had any idea that he'd have any reservations about doing this. This is just what you were supposed to do. It was not uncommon for people like Jim to be dismissed as thoughtless rabble-rousers and troublemakers. People would even call him a Luddite. But dissent grew from all levels of the industry. So Daniel McCracken, for instance, was renowned for his technical writing until he passed in 2011. And his first book, A Guide to Fortran Programming, was a bestseller. It was the standard textbook for the Fortran programming language for decades after it was published in 1961. McCracken organized the group Computer Professionals Against ABM, that stood for Anti-Ballistic Missiles. He started that group in 1970 with people like Joseph Weizenbaum, who is considered a pioneer of artificial intelligence, and Paul Armour, who was one of the first directors of the Stanford Computation Center. Computer Professionals Against ABM was active for several years and won the support of other highly regarded names in the profession like John Backus of IBM, who practically invented the Fortran programming language. Dozens of groups like this rose, and listing them all would be kind of like, it would sound like I was reading off like a Wi-Fi password. CSRE, SSPA, CCPP, CPSR. The point is that there was a lot happening, and by 1969, the New York Times could describe a deep groundswell of discontent that had grown among scientific and technical workers. And a month after they printed that article on March 4th, students and faculty at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology shut down their campus to demand an end to military-related research. And seeing the way that technology was being applied, you know, it'd be easy for people at the time to assume that, you know, all this was for no good. You know, I don't want to be a part of this. Just, I want to go to the woods and, you know, do my thing with my hippie commune. I don't want to be a part of this. But you know, it wasn't just the military that was using computers in this way. It was, you know, new reports kept emerging. Police departments were creating data banks. Landlords were using computers to calculate rents that they could use to avoid rent control. So if you're wondering whatever happened to rent control in New York, I don't know, I guess it was computers. Large manufacturers began to speed up production through automation. And there was no doubt, of course, that computers could obviously be used for good and radically improve society. And organizations like Computer People for Peace relished in imagining the possibilities of computers in healthcare, welfare offices, public transit, just relieving people of the drudgery of boring and repetitive tasks. But as far as they were concerned, so long as corporate power dominated the application of these technologies, these possibilities could only be corrupted. There had to be a shift in power away from corporations into regular people for them to realize their vision. Computer People for Peace was founded in 1968 in New York as they were originally called Computer Professionals for Peace, but they thought that professionals was too exclusionary, so they changed their name to People, which I think is a lot cuter. They were a small but ambitious organization against the war in Vietnam, and they held meetings in a member's Greenwich Village apartment, which is why this photo of Greenwich Village is here. Newcomers were welcomed to the meeting at the door and kindly greeted with, "Oh, another programmer for peace." But their quaintness shouldn't distract you from their seriousness. This was a group that was dedicated to building a real movement of technology workers in the United States. And they ran a newsletter called Interrupt that they distributed across the country. And they encouraged their supporters to order dozens of copies at a time to share with their coworkers, to leave in break rooms, to give to students, and so on. And they said, in their newsletter, they said, "Computers might be neutral tools, but we have learned that their use fits well into the dynamic of corporate life in the United States. Peace can only come from a just society based on technology developed for human need, not for corporate profit. The challenge to our organization is just beginning." Their efforts bore fruit and they grew rapidly, and new chapters appeared in cities across the United States, and as they grew, so did the scope of their activities. So in Boston, for instance, they organized defense for workers that were fired from a company for unionizing. In Los Angeles, the members helped engineers in the defense industry find more civilian jobs. In Washington, they testified before the Senate about the dangers that computers pose to individual privacy. And back in New York, they started a computer training program for Black and Latino workers and helped them find jobs in the industry. And they even started raising legal defense funds for the Black Panthers. Now this really pissed off some of their more conservative readers, but it also got them an honorable mention in Assad Shakur's autobiography. Interrupt published regular reports about the conditions that workers faced in their industry. So they would write articles, for instance, on the women describing being held at lower paid positions in the industry, and other times when people were returning from maternity leave to find that they'd been permanently replaced. They also ran columns attacking sexist advertisements in professional publications. So this ad, for instance, described a computer named Sue, which stood for Systems User Engineered Mini Computer. And Sue was flexible, responsive, adaptable, and nearly ageless. They cooperated with other organizations across the industry, like the Black Workers Alliance at IBM, who organized not only against racial discrimination at work, but also protested the use of IBM's computers by the apartheid government in South Africa. And this is just a fraction of the work that this organization did, and volumes could be filled accounting for the activity and the legacy of their work. In the late 1960s, the economy began to slow down and started affecting the computer industry. Unemployment started to grow among engineers, and Interrupt began reporting on how layoffs and the economic slowdown were affecting their industry. The fear of falling behind became a common refrain among workers in the industry. An article by an IBM worker named Cassandra quoted the Beatles when she asked her employer, "Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?" One thing you could do, according to Cassandra, was to organize. Organizing shifts power from the hands of people who have it into the hands of people who don't. It's necessarily an exercise in democracy. And organizations for organizations like Computer People for Peace, who wanted to change the way that technology was being used, bringing democracy into the workplaces where technology was being designed and developed was urgently needed. Through collective action, they wrote, change can be brought, and we strive to follow that model in both our personal lives and our jobs. When people organize, they cannot be as easily manipulated and exploited. Workplace organizing, they continued, is often the most effective way of reaching people, in part because people spend so much time at work. And opportunities to organize technology workers continued to spread as the economic crisis continued into the 1970s. And employees at one Cambridge-based technology firm launched an underground newspaper called Signal Noyce. And inside they coordinated voluntary wage and salary disclosure in order to combat inequality in pay between men and women at work. And members of Computer People for Peace formed the committee to form a computer union to explore the possibility of forming unions in tech workplaces. I want to make a quick note about unions. Traditionally, workers who decide that they need a stronger voice at their workplace will form a union. And a union is an organization of non-managerial employees at a workplace that collectively negotiates the terms and conditions of work. Unions can negotiate higher wages, paid time off, and even pool access. Most workers in the United States don't have a union, and because they're unable to bargain for better pay and benefits, the decline of union membership has had a corrosive impact on social equality in the United States overall. Technology workers, technology labor like software development is one of the least organized occupations in the US, and some union organizers have even described the tech industry as simply unorganizable. Organizing, I should say, as someone who recently participated in unionizing their workplace, is always difficult, and should never be undertaken lightly. It's also literally one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. The challenges facing unions in the tech industry go back as far as Silicon Valley's infancy. Robert Noyce, the founder of Intel and the so-called mayor of Silicon Valley, once told the journalist Tom Wolfe that he regarded unions as a death threat to the semiconductor industry generally. Elsewhere, he stated that remaining non-union was essential for most of the companies in Silicon Valley. Workers at Intel tried several times but failed to organize a union at their company, and this experience was repeated elsewhere across the industry. So at Atari, for instance, in 1983, workers held a union election there and voted 4-1 against unionization. And one possible explanation for this difficulty might be that tech workers simply haven't felt that they needed a union. Noyce also once commented that the simplest way to keep unions out of the workplace was to pretend like one was already there. And the high salaries and better than average benefits of the technology industry are well known. But hostility to unions should not be counted out. In the 1970s, a union campaign at Smith Corona, who produced electronic word processors in Silicon Valley, ended after employers held a series of captive audience anti-union meetings. And in 1992, a strike by production line workers at a company called Versatronics won the workers there a union recognition, but the company quickly closed shop afterward. And this intransigence continues today. Workers at the software firm Lanatex formed a union last year after a female coworker was dismissed after asking for increased time off. And then when they formed the union, the entire engineering staff was fired shortly afterward. But last month, they won a very important victory. The National Labor Relations Board, which is the federal agency that enforces labor laws, determined that they were illegally fired and filed a complaint against Lanatex. So the fight goes on. Where unions have made very important progress in the technology world is in organizing the so-called invisible workforce. So cafeteria workers, drivers, security guards, janitors, and so on. In the case of security guards at Facebook and Google, union has meant wage increases, improved time off, improved healthcare, paid time off, and more. And before forming a union, security guards were only earning $14 an hour at a company where the median salary can be up to $200,000 a year, and one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. And in several cases, engineers through organizations like the Tech Workers Coalition have provided very important support for these efforts. But beyond bread and butter issues, I think we have to talk about, I want to go back to an earlier point. This is about having a voice at work. This is about democracy. And when we're talking about technology, democracy is critical. The power of technologies like machine learning, for example, is too great to leave the decisions over how they're used simply to people who are accountable to shareholders in the bottom line. Last summer, the American Civil Liberties Union revealed that Amazon was marketing its facial recognition technology to law enforcement agencies like Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. And workers at Amazon responded by publishing an open letter to Jeff Bezos. In their letter, they stated that technology like ours is playing an increasingly critical role across many sectors of society. And what is clear to us is that development and sales practices have yet to acknowledge the obligation that comes with this. Focusing solely on shareholder value is a race to the bottom, and one that we will not participate in. There are two souls to technology. Technology for people, social responsibility and social benefit, and technology for power and profit. These two things are not necessarily always in conflict, but when everything is expected to pass through the needlehead of profit, ethical responsibility is easily cast aside. And that's why responsible technology requires and demands democracy. And perhaps nothing captures the promise of democracy and technology more than the Lucas Aerospace Plan. In 1976, workers at Lucas Aerospace, which was a British company, were facing layoffs. The overwhelming majority of the company's revenue was generated through military contracts through the government. And so the union proposed a different kind of plan. They reasoned, well, if most of the money for this company comes from the government, then why not simply put that money into letting us produce socially beneficial technology? And they conducted a massive study. They polled the workers, community members, reached out to researchers, and proposed up to 150 different products. They proposed job training programs. They conducted market research. The Financial Times at the time called it one of the most radical alternative plans ever drawn up by workers to their company. Technology does not change society on its own. It takes people to do that. And how technology is used depends on power and influence, who has it and who doesn't. Who has a voice in society? Who is speaking up? To change the world, people need to organize. So I just want to share some resources for people who are interested in checking things out more. I think if you're interested in looking at organizations, you can look at the Tech Workers Coalition. You can also look at the Tech Action Working Group of the Democratic Socialists of America. You can also look at Science for the People, which is an organization that existed in the 1970s that was recently relaunched. If you're looking for reading, the archives of the newsletter Interrupt were kindly published by Eli on their website. This talk could not have been possible without all that. A lot of this talk was just like primary research looking at these PDFs of newsletters from, they were at the NYU archives. I also highly recommend the Data and Society newsletter on labor and tech. If you're looking for books, these are books that I used for a lot of the research here. Engineers for Change by Matt Wisnowski. A People's History of Computing in the United States by Joy Lucy Rankin is coming out, I believe, next month. And Windows on the Workplace is an incredible book about how computers have changed the modern workplace. And the author, Joan Greenbaum, was actually a member of Computer People for Peace. So again, my name is Aaron. If you'd like to stay in touch, my contact info is here. I'm Ugh, it's Aaron on most websites that you use to get a hold of people. I'm also crimes.cool on the World Wide Web. Thank you very much.